So I normally edit my videos in Final Cut Pro. I'm not really an expert in Final Cut Pro, so it's quite possible all the things I'm about to show you are more than doable in video editing software. But I made most of my videos so far in this, we can scrub through a bit here, but they're mainly just slides. Sometimes other things. These ones are actually a little more complicated, but most of them are PowerPoint presentations with me talking. As you can see in here, the talking part and the slides part, and then I edit it up and stitch it. The problem I was having, this works pretty well for the most part, but if I want to change something, say I want to change a detail on this slide because I made a mistake or I get some feedback, I would risk when I replace things and move it, you can see everything moves. So like if you remove this bit, now the audio and the video becomes out of sync from that point forwards. And that just scared the crap out of me because we spend a long time like making sure everything's perfect down here. You make an edit early on in the video and you break everything. There might be a way of like doing this better in here that would mean that you could be pretty confident that like you weren't going to break that. When you edit a YouTube video or something, you can't re-upload it. So you don't have this like problem of needing to change the content. I also needed to make some videos, some new videos, and it's actually super boring to make them. It's a big chore. So I promised myself that if I made some videos, I could do a cool technical thing, and that's what this was. What I wanted to do instead was see if I could specify these videos, which do follow quite a formulaic, they're very samey, they're all kind of the same. If I could automate a lot of that and make it safer to make edits using code. And so this is the like prototype that I've come up with. This is my part of the JavaScript course I'm doing at the moment. The 5th video on Booleans, very exciting. This is what the timeline for this video looks like. So you tell it like, hey, here's a folder. If we look at that folder, it's full of assets. So it has an audio and a videos thing. It's got a bunch of PNGs, which are static slides. Cool. And a bunch of videos, which are mainly the transitions between slides. So it's anything that's kind of animated. I actually made a separate script to extract these from Keynote. And actually, that in itself, even using Final Cut Pro, would have been was a pretty good idea that perhaps I should have done before today, right? Because I didn't used to do it like that. So you get a folder like this, and then the other folder contains all the audio. So that's just a file per sentence or couple of sentences, something like that. In the timeline, that's the first thing you do is say, this is the folder I'm talking about. And then it's an array. Each object specifies the audio and the videos. So this video is just the image 0, which will say like Booleans or something. And then I have like standard gaps. So this is a medium gap. This is the start of a section. This is the end of the section, which lets me be very consistent. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, or if it's too robotic, but it means that if I want to change the gap at the start of every time I start talking, I can just update this function and it will change it everywhere, which is also pretty cool. As far as I know, it's quite hard to do something like that in conventional video editing software, but it's also very possible that I'm just ignorant of like how to do that. And then you say, so like the file, so this will be 0.mp3, and then I also am now including the captions, so the closed captions for that video. So this will just show up, and if you want to have the captions on, and it will show up at the right time. So you get some. If we look at a more complicated example, so I've actually commented out most of this video to make it easier to demo to you. So let's find, so this one's more interesting. So it's an image which lasts for 2.5 seconds, then a video, then an image which lasts for 6 seconds, then a video, then an image. Like most of them go in tandem like that. And there's a bunch of audio in there as well. Here I've used a mid gap at the end, and then I've ended the section here. So this is actually probably one section, but it's kind of arbitrary how you break them up. I've found over time, it doesn't really matter. And the cool thing about this is because of the way this is generated with code is that if you make a change to this part, you kind of know everything afterwards will still work because it's, the code will do the right thing and it generates the video correctly. So you can only really, if you're editing a section, you can kind of only really mess up that section, maybe the join into the adjacent section, but you're certainly not going to mess up anything like more than 2 sections forward from and nothing in the past. So it's just kind of neat to be able to do that. And if you need to update like one PNG or one video, you can just drop it in. The whole thing is just managed in Git. I use like Git LFS or whatever it's called, large file storage, to do this. So if you want to make a change, then you just like update the file and commit it and push it, kind of like the way that most developers are used to working. So I will quickly show you how it works. You point it to that file that has the timeline defined. And here I'm using write true. So the first thing it does is I've made it print the timeline. So this is actually what a timeline looks like. I was using that shorthand, but all those functions really do is actually produce the longhand. So this was the first one we looked at. And you can see actually when it's expanded, this is of type gap. And then we have a 0.mp3 and an audio, and here we have another gap and blah, 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 blah. And then the video is a type image. So it's kind of just like JSON or key value pairs that define these things. And this is what then goes into kind of like the code which actually produces the video. So the thing I showed you before is really just shorthand that actually just produces this. So let's run this again. So it will calculate where the videos need to go together, when the audio, and then it uses ffmpeg inside Python to stitch those together. So you can see how this is writing here. It's writing, this is a preview, so it's only 720p. I want to generate most of my videos in 4K just for like future proofing. And that is the video. You probably see the captions fire in a second, maybe? No, but it does work. So that generates to this folder here, and then you have the captions as well. So it generates all of this. And so that's one mode you can run it in. But what I've found is if you're working with quite a long video, when you're editing, you really only want to look at like a specific part of the video, the bit that you're kind of working on. So to do that, you can provide some extra params here. So you can actually say from like 4 to 5. And that will take the fourth and fifth part, like probably just take one part of the time frame. Yeah, so in this example, it was just the last one, which says tasks. Okay, now for some reason, the captions are working. That could be a bug. Quite likely it's a bug. So let's do like 3 to 5 instead. So this video will start a little earlier. It also means it generates quicker, which is useful. Because if you generate the full like 2 or 3 minute video, it does take, even with like 720p and a bunch of fast settings, it still takes longer. Cool, so that's worked pretty well. And there you go, you can see what I would be saying if you could hear it. So that's one mode you can run it in. You can also remove the write equals true. And then what this does, I'll show you as well before we jump into that. Initially when I did this, I used a library called MoviePy. So MoviePy is a library that basically lets you edit video in Python, and it's kind of easy to get going. And I built the whole thing on this, and generating a 4-minute video in 4K took, on my Mac, which is pretty old, like 5 years old, it took about 6 hours, but on a pretty powerful desktop, it took like 2 hours to generate a 4-minute video in 4K, which is outrageous. And the preview was okay, but it was nowhere near 720p. It was like worse than 480p, and it was pretty slow. So I switched it out for ffmpeg. So there's a Python ffmpeg package. I think there's one for Node and a bunch of other languages. All this package is good, but all it really does is produce an ffmpeg command line and then basically run it in a process in Python. So it's really just a wrapper to help you build the command. And this is the command for this video that we've just done. So I've actually changed my code and you can print it out. And so you could not reasonably produce this. You can see we're taking video 44, 46, blah, blah, blah. Some of the images as well. Like there's a whole bunch of crap going on in here, applying a bunch of filters. And if we were to copy and paste this command from the same folder, in theory, although I think it's not escape, but in theory, it would generate the video. And so that is all it does. So now if we run this without the write command, I'm going to make this a bit bigger. Maybe should have done that sooner. Sorry. So now what happens is the video actually just starts playing immediately. And I'm going to explain what happened there. So now it's not generating a file anymore. What what it's doing in this mode is, if you imagine that giant ffmpeg, if you can hopefully see this, was like -i, like 1.mp4, and then there's like this whole massive thing. And then what it does is it pipes it into ffplay with like basically no ffplay. I have not heard of, but it's like a really lightweight. I think the it's made by the same people or is somehow related to ffmpeg. This project has not made me an expert in ffmpeg, which is still really, really confusing. ffplay seems to just play anything, and you can basically pipe the output of the ffmpeg command into ffplay, and so it will start playing before the video is actually finished encoding. So this basically just lets you see your video close to real time if you have the right settings. So if we run it again, you'll actually see hopefully a little better. So it does that. Then ffmpeg, it seems to like do something at the start, and then it gets going, and then it starts playing. And it's pretty cool. You can hear the audio. You can't see the captions because ffplay doesn't have that. But the captions are less important because actually my code works every time. So as long as you put the right text in the boxes, it does just work, and you can just check it at the end of the editing process because you can trust the code. So that's pretty cool. And then finally, there's a similar command, but like build. So build course, and this basically does the same thing, but it actually generates it in 4K, so it's like the final thing. But it also does some other things that these videos need. So I add a watermark to stop people stealing it, and I add a little intro with a jingle. It's pretty short, but it's just the logo, and it has like a nice little sound. And this is the process that before was taking 2 to 6 hours, depending on which machine. And now you can see my Mac is on fire because it's super old, but it's doing it at like 0.3 times real time. It's actually, normally it gets to like 0.5, depending on how my Mac is feeling, which is pretty good. So it means a 4-minute video would take 8 minutes to produce. This video I've shortened quite a bit, so hopefully this will like complete in a minute. Basically, ffmpeg is just an absolute beast, and it uses all the threads on your machine and stuff. And it's pretty cool. So I don't actually store the full videos anymore. I just store the source code because you can regenerate them at any time. So let's have a look at some of the code for the things we just saw. So they're not too exciting. This is the code that adds the watermark and prepends the intro. So these things are kind of like completely repeatable, so like you just don't need to sort that for each video in the series, which is pretty cool. Maybe there's a nice way to do that. I mean, that probably wouldn't take very long in video editing software anyway, but it is nice to be completely consistent. And if you want to make a change, like if you want to change your intro everywhere, or your watermark, you just change this and then just run like a bunch of commands and you'll regenerate all the video. Okay, so that 4K video is finished. So this is the little thing at the beginning with the jingle, and then you've got the little watermark down here, and you can see that the captions are working on this. So that the command which pipes the ffmpeg output into ffplay looks like this. So you they kind of had an example, but I've had to run with it a bit. I've not managed to make it work with VLC. I don't know if that's possible. In theory, it's possible. You can pipe into VLC, but the same approach didn't seem to work at all. So you just say like, yeah, I'm piping to standard out, and then you have a standard like Python sub-process, and you literally just like say ffplay-i, and then pipe in the output of the first process and then like run them both, and that's it. And it seems to work really. It works way better than I thought it would work. The whole thing actually works way better than I thought it would work. ffmpeg is still a pain in the ass. Like once you have the magic incantation to make it work, and once I got it right, it's obviously really fast and it's amazing. But each time you want to add a new operation, like budget a couple of hours maybe to make it work. And there are still like things I had to like kind of hack the way it works, because concatenating lots of videos together. If you concatenate videos to produce a video inside ffmpeg, and then you try and concatenate that to something else, that just like doesn't work. I don't know why. And there are people on GitHub being like, yeah, this doesn't seem to work. I think you probably could do it. I just haven't figured out. My mental model of ffmpeg is still surprisingly terrible. It's just very complicated. Apparently it's like a graph system. I don't know. So yeah, that's kind of it. But yeah, it's like a cool little side project. I do think that this could be a good thing, that someone could maybe like build a library that was good. But for now, this is like working for me, and it's like much faster than it was before, and it's been kind of interesting. So cool.